Welcome to the RetailWire podcast. On today's episode, we have an interview with Jeff Sward. We're going to learn a lot about his expertise, and we're going to dive deep into a topic that he wrote about on RetailWire.com about TJ Maxx and discount store business models. Looking forward to jumping in. Jeff, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Good morning, Chase.
So tell us a little bit about your role and your background, just so the listeners know what perspective we're taking.
Sure. I started in the department store business with a division of Federated Department Stores many years ago, long before any of the consolidations. I spent about 14 years at Bullock's in Los Angeles, went to Macy's, Saks Fifth Avenue, Abercrombie and Fitch, and American Eagle Outfitters. So I was very lucky to have both a department store and specialty store background in there, and then made the jump over to wholesale with Oxford Industries. And I had roles in Polo Ralph Lauren Boys and Donna Karan Girls. And then my last role at Oxford was group president for merchandising and design. And that was for our whole private label and product development business. So I've had the good fortune to have a number of different exposures in the business.
Well, it's a lot of experience to back up some of your latest insights. One of the things that we want to talk about today is the article you wrote. And it starts out by saying the demise of the department store has been happening for longer than many people realize. And you mentioned the internet and e-commerce. And then there was a graph that you saw that really helped you. It says, I didn't fully grasp the degree of this shift until I saw the graph below. Tell me more about that. Were you researching at the time? How did you come across this? And what was the realization you had?
It was really just part of my daily scrolling through different business articles and just kind of general background reading. And I saw these two graphs, and I really found them quite mesmerizing in that, having lived through this evolution and this demise, if you will, of department stores, I never really fully recognized the degree that the role of the department store had 20 and 30 years ago and has today. The dollar sales decline. But what really caught my attention was going from almost 10% market share to these days 2%. that just took my breath. I started to do a little homework and looked at then the growth of TJ Maxx and Ross and some of the other off-pricers. It was just, they didn't trade dollars dollar for dollar, but as department stores were doing this, the off-pricers were doing this. And what struck me was that it's one thing to say, well, of course, the department stores and lots of retailers lost business to the internet. But during that whole window, the off-pricers weren't driven by the internet. That was physical retail, foot traffic, get in your car, go to the store kind of business. Yep. So literally, the mall was losing not just to the internet, but the mall was losing to the discounters. And then what really kind of shook me was the understanding and the realization, which I've had for a while now, but this kind of put an exclamation point on it, was that the way that market works, in that the discounters, the off-pricers literally live on the excess inventory of the mall retailers, either at the factory level or at the store level, that the department stores over the years and the mall retailers in general have been continuously feeding the growth of the off-pricers, season after season, with their ending inventories that they wanted to liquidate. They just serve it up to TJ Maxx, and TJ Maxx says, thank you very much. And their business grows and thrives. And I'm oversimplifying a little bit here, but I think that's the essence of the model. And then I read an article from just a couple of weeks ago where the CEO of TJX was saying how he's looking forward to the abundant opportunities in the marketplace for further market share growth, which means the mall retailers are going to continue to feed TJ Maxx all of this excess inventory. And, so I kind of asked myself the question, what would it take for TJ Maxx to have a tough year? Because when everybody else is having a tough year, that just means abundant inventory for TJ Maxx and customers looking for a bargain. So that works okay for them. In a good year, there's still plenty of growth to go around. So really, what would it take to have for TJ Maxx to have a difficult year? And that's where the headline came from. Is that, does TJ Maxx really have the most bulletproof business model in retail today? I kind of just marveled at the whole scenario when I really stepped back from it and looked like it like that. So yeah, therein, was the premise for the whole article, and I really had hoped it would percolate some very energetic conversation, and it did.
So there are different perspectives on this too. Some might say that the department stores had it coming due to their failure to adapt. What's your response to that?
Completely agree. Again, I was oversimplifying a little bit in that I think department stores have relied on a basic business model and a basic physical retail presentation that dates back to the 80s and 70s and 60s of the prior century. And they literally have not evolved, in a manner that makes them more current in their role as an omni-channel player versus just, basically when they did not have the internet as competition, they have not evolved. So it really, one magnifies the other in that, they're losing this giant chunk of business to the convenience and the breadth of offering on the internet is one giant siphon. And then the other siphon is, well, whatever's available in the department stores is available sooner or later at TJ Maxx at a fraction of the price. So as a customer, I just have to be a little bit patient and I'll visit TJ Maxx. So the department stores really, they got a double whammy on that whole thing. And therein lies their slide from 10% of market to 2%. It's a tough hit.
There's that advantage of having a consistent source of discounted supply. And who did most of the brand equity building, right? It's not TJX who started doing advertising and helping boost some of these brands. The brands and the retailers at the department store level were pushing these brands and building up that value. Do you see a connection to there? It's almost like discounted physical goods, but also kind of a very cost-efficient brand awareness for the brands that they carry.
Yeah, I think you put it quite nicely there. Department stores spent decades building up the perception of brands in the eyes of consumers for either moderate or better goods. And TJ Maxx really didn't have to do any marketing other than we're here for value and low price. So all of the brand equity, all of the perception was invested in and built by the brands and the department stores and the mall players. And again, TJ Maxx said, thank you very much for building all that great brand equity and everything. We will now happily offer all that product at a deeply discounted price. And, in the beginning, I think it played beautifully because in the beginning, meaning 20 and 30 years ago, brands and retailers told themselves that TJ Maxx was invisible, that there were so few outlets selling the stores that it really wasn't an issue then. And it happened to be a really efficient way of getting rid of excess inventory. And by the way, of in the beginning, not having a constant presence of sale on the floor. At some point, you remove it, it goes away to TJ Maxx, and the department store floors then it can be maximized for regular price selling. Well, that's not the market these days. It seems like everything is on sale all the time anyway, and it's just that well, so is TJ Maxx, but at probably lower prices. So yes, TJ Maxx was able to take advantage of all of that brand equity that everybody else built for them that they could simply just then offer the product in their stores with by the way not having to invest in elegant fixturing or elegant shops or any of the other you know better levels of presentation. They put it all out on racks and the customer was happy to say thank you, I'll go on my treasure hunt now. So
Yeah.
yeah, that treasure hunt mentality was just a beautiful thing to watch evolve.
Well, I can't help but connect the dots there with today's forms of user generated content or kind of lower quality advertising that looks more authentic. The pattern I'm seeing is people associate more authentic brands and sometimes a better deal, better prices when there's not a high glossy advertisement or a very expensive looking commercial, right? And it works well for certain brands that want to play the value price angle. It probably doesn't work that well for selling a BMW.
Yeah, I can't really speak with authority on that. I look at a lot of user generated content and I find it amusing and entertaining, but I don't necessarily view it as brand building in the way that I used to. Because to me, let's face it, I'm a boomer. I grew up in literally the stock rooms and the selling floors of retail in a very hands-on manner. So to me, brand building, a huge part of a brand loyalty for me is experiencing the product in person,
Right.
in my hands. I am again amused and entertained by everything I see online, but to me, it's not really real until I
Yeah.
experience the product in person. So it, it's additive to the whole thing, but I can't say that I relate to it like somebody, let's face it, several decades younger than I would be.
Yeah. But in a TJ Maxx, the way the displays are set up, it's really nothing too fancy. And it gives you
No,
that feeling of, I think I'm going to find something, like you said, the word treasure hunt. I think
right.
I'm going to find something that's unique, even if it's not. It just feels like you're going to discover something new because it's not set up in a visual way that a Macy's might set up.
Right. I look, I still go to TJ Maxx every now and then because it happens to be down the strip mall from my grocery store. And I figure from both a personal and a professional point of view, I'm just going to go spend 10 to 15 minutes and see what's there. And sometimes I buy something and sometimes I don't, but it is the curiosity about saying to myself, I wonder if I'll find something today. And, I don't have that same level of curiosity about the mall or about department stores. I do about a couple of particular retailers, but in general, I don't have high expectations when I go to the mall. And it's not even that I have a high expectation when I go to the TJ Maxx, but if I find something, it's because it really is. I guess it goes to the treasure hunt mentality. I really wasn't expecting to find anything, but oh my
Mhm.
gosh, look at this gem I've found, and look at the
Yeah.
great value. It's the whole treasure hunt thing it's a tough phenomenon to describe, but I think it is a huge part of what makes TJ Maxx tick, and all the other off pricers.
hmm It it sounded like this advantage was just handed to the discount or the off price retailers. Do you think that the department stores selling to them knew that they were giving them this advantage? You said that they saw them as invisible, not really a threat. But do you think many in those positions were thinking this was a threat that we should be aware of?
I I think it's classic frog in boiling water scenario, in that in the beginning, again, it was a relief just to be able to get rid of the inventory, and the sheer number of off price outlets wasn't a threat. And then over the years, the water kept getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And then one day, everybody wakes up and says, "Oh, the water's boiling. Wait a minute, I'm in trouble." And I think, for instance, when Macy's within their own four walls did, those last call departments where they segregated all of their sale goods and put them into one big room. And then there's the other, end of season offering that they've got, whose name escapes me for the moment. But Macy's literally, tried to create the TJ Maxx off price phenomenon within their own four walls. So in a way, I think that was both brilliant and its own problem, in that it's now all of a sudden that much easier for the customer to walk right by all the regular
Yep.
price stuff and back
Yep.
into the sale room, but at least they're walking into the Macy's sale room and not TJ Maxx. So it's a damned
Yeah.
if I do, damned if I don't scenario.
Do you see any of the customers transitioning from being a full price buyer to an off price buyer? I mean, a lot of times people would say these are two completely different segments. So they might walk past the full price to that sales stuff. But are you seeing any patterns where people who normally would buy the full price, they're going, well, why would I buy full price when I can get the same thing kind of in the clearance?
I That's a little bit difficult to answer because, I guess I view a store at the Nordstrom level as to still be a department store that operates on selling product at regular ticketed prices. When the
Yeah.
customer walks into Nordstrom, they expect, or at least they're willing, to pay full price, because that's the game at Nordstrom. When they walk into Macy's, they are immediately greeted by sale signs or discount signs of some nature on an overwhelming number of the fixtures. So immediately, the internal competition just between this fixture and that fixture in Macy's is immediate competition between regular price product and sale product. Or when I get the email from any given retailer that says, and I think, well,
Yeah.
wait a minute.
What did
If
they have
it's
to, why did they
new,
have to earn your business when you were
right?
about to shop?
You're not even going to try to sell it at regular price, I mean, it's new and it's instantly on sale. I
Yeah.
mean, that is the kind of the retailer malady these days, that if they don't offer some level of promotion or discount or BOGO or something, then either the next store does or the next fixture in their own store does.
Yeah.
And I don't know how they extract themselves from that scenario.
Well, the psychology of a consumer, and we're all consumers. And so when I see a discount on something when it just came out, I'm thinking, well, why did they artificially put that?
Right.
Why did they put that so high? If it really is valued here, and if I'm trying to sell something, yeah, the first attempt really should be convey the value and have someone buy it for the value that you've placed on it. It's a little bit counterintuitive. It kind of makes it look like it didn't sell for that, or it shouldn't have ever been priced that high.
Well, right, and I think that's the corner that so many retailers have painted themselves into, that the prevalence of sales and discounts and promotions is so ubiquitous that if you as a retailer aren't offering some level of your own sale or discount, then the customer's just going to walk 10 feet into the next store. So, I think there are solutions, but I think that it means that stores would probably have to shrink in sales as they forego promotionally driven business. But it might mean that they could do more business at higher margins. Might be less business overall, but it would be a healthier, more profitable business that would be better in the long run. And I guess I'm thinking about, the Macy's move from full line, huge department store, mall based department stores to smaller footprint strip mall locations, which I think is absolutely the right move. But if all they do is take the same merchandising and sale driven posture in the small stores as they do in the big stores, then it's just kind of a real estate strategy. It's not a reinvention of the business strategy. So I think there are solutions, but I think ultimately those kinds of solutions are going to be scarcity driven, so that there's a whole what I call limited edition kind of thinking, where as a retailer I'm going to say, look, I'm only going to offer so many of these items and they're this price, and when they're gone, they're gone. Now, so that in itself limits the sales upside, but it does protect the image of the brand, I think, in saying that, I'm going to make myself distinctive simply by saying, I'm going to offer, more distinctive product on a limited edition point of view than just having rack after rack after rack of goods with a sale sign on top of each one. So I think that, the pursuit of growth has, and this whole subject of overconsumption and that whole thing has really been a complicating factor for retail. Felt good while we were doing it, but it kind of put us in a tough spot.
Is there a pattern as department stores grew and malls kind of grew? It's like you become a large marketplace, and there's this assumption that you have to serve every kind of customer. So you no longer have, when you talked about, I'm thinking of Dillard's because we have a Dillard's nearby, but you said Nordstrom. There's an assumption that you walk into a Nordstrom and you are looking to pay more of a regular price, not so much of the sale driven. And because they have a large footprint, is there more of an assumption that they're more of a marketplace for everyone and they have to have options for everyone? Would a smaller footprint store play better into full price, just like a luxury boutique would?
I think there's probably a role for both large and small footprints. I think that's more market size and demographic driven. I think what you're talking about is more of a how does a retailer want to define their brand promise? What kind of boundaries do they want to give themselves? And I think a lot of retailers over time kept thinking that they should stretch their boundaries both up and down.
Yep.
And I, I understand the temptation to do both, but I think that what has happened is that people say that the market has just flat out bifurcated anyway. It's either Nordstrom or Walmart, and
Right.
the whole middle has just collapsed. And I speaking as really as a customer of what would still be the middle market. I mean, as much as I like to shop in Nordstrom every now and then, I would really much rather shop at a Macy's or a Dillard's but the attitude is almost, well, if I just might as well go to TJ Maxx because what's offered at Macy's isn't special enough. And
Right.
I don't have the same appetite for Nordstrom level product as I used to. So the definition that a retailer wants to create for their brand promise, I think most retailers need to revisit that. I think a retailer that has done two retailers that have done an outstanding job at it is American Eagle Outfitters, who have a focused customer that they talk to, and I think they talk to them brilliantly and consistently. And it happens to be a retailer that has continually very little end of season inventory. And American Eagle Outfitters has stayed pretty consistent with what they've been all about for at least 25 years. And I worked for them for a little while, so I have some feeling for what the DNA is there. The other retailer that I think has done a really good job is Abercrombie and Fitch. Again, I worked for them for a little while, a long time ago. But if you watch how about how Abercrombie has redefined their brand promise and redefined the attitude and the aesthetic that they use to talk to that consumer, I think it's been a brilliant kind of reinvention of a refocusing, not up or down, but just kind of a
Mhm.
refocusing and a reinvention of an attitude and an aesthetic where they've got distinction. They can no longer be confused with American Eagle Outfitters. I mean, for a while there, if you lined up Abercrombie and American Eagle and Aeropostale and
Yeah.
PacSun, I mean, that was, they were all on one little continuum of jeans and hoodies.
I
And
remember
now,
that.
right. And
2005 to 2010.
exactly. And that worked okay for a while, but for a lot of reasons, Abercrombie had to reinvent themselves. And now look at the results they're getting. They're now getting terrific results again as a result of redefining their boundaries and their attitude and their aesthetic. So, but man, they went through some tough times to do it. But I give them huge credit for what they've accomplished.
Well, that you make a, I love this topic because everyone goes through tough times, but it depends on what you do with that. And if you kind of have a minor freak out and change your brand and go this way or go that way, or if you stay the course. I don't know where Aeropostale went. I think they went discount. Like I always remember them as like the cheaper alternative to Abercrombie and American Eagle, and I don't know where they went. But I know when I traveled in Latin America, I went to South America and Central America. I hadn't seen Aeropostale clothing in probably 10 years, 10 years. And when I went down there, everybody was wearing it.
Hmm.
So there's that secondary market where all the clothing, like just pallets of clothing, just end up kind of sold as new there. They also were really into Limp Bizkit and some of those old music bands. So, but back to this staying the course and being able to take your brand and mature it or define it or even sometimes make it more exclusive. It's so tempting to say we're losing out to our competitor, let's try to be like them. But you gave a couple examples. I don't know if you have any more background on that, but it just, I love those stories where brands say we're hitting hard times, but let's stay the course. Let's find a way to define ourselves and keep that original vision, keep that original personality of the brand, and just see where we can take it with the new market, with the latest changes in the economy.
Yeah, I think as if I made it into a general statement, for a retailer to survive and ultimately thrive, I think it's all about differentiation and distinction. If if it becomes about price, it's an immediately you're into this race to the bottom conversation.
Right.
But some level of distinction and differentiation is critical to being able to establish some kind of moat to all of the pretenders to the throne. Another great example, Polo Ralph Lauren, where you could take some of his current designs, and if you told me they're from 2007 or 1880 or 1987, I'd have to say, okay, that's possible. But somehow Ralph Lauren, with their marketing and their store presentation and just the way they behave as a brand, they somehow managed to keep it fresh. And again, there's another brand where at one point you could line up Ralph Lauren and Nautica and Tommy Hilfiger, and they were all these huge department store brands that were directed at the traditional market, or the, oh God, what's the word I'm missing? But they were kind of three birds of a feather, each with their own point of view. But Ralph Lauren is the one that has survived and thrived. Tommy's doing well. I don't see much of Nautica, these days. But it's not as if preppy was the word I was looking for, but it's not as
Right.
if preppy traditional menswear, is this new thing. But
Right.
Ralph Lauren has kept it fresh. It's really a great example of a DNA that dates way back, but is just as meaningful today as it was way back when.
Those are the type of brands that when you see young, just a new trend, a new fashion trend and people are throwing back to these nostalgic styles, it's
Right.
almost ironic. You go, that's so funny, especially, you've seen it through the years. So you can see someone young wearing it. You're like, they don't even know what that means. But it's like an ironic fashion where someone might say, this is what people used to wear in the early 90s. I'm going to wear it because it's kind of ironic. It's different. And they're
Right.
back to that word differentiation. And it takes on a new life because it's part of the language. It's part of that language of culture.
Yep.
This is something that meant something to someone, and young people might not even know what it means, but they take on and give it a new meaning,
Well,
and
I,
that
I
brand
think that's
survives.
that's the beauty of, or that is the challenge of brand management, is the continual freshening of the point of view. And I think that's what, back to our original, that's what department stores just failed to do. They failed to keep it fresh over the years. They got into this price driven race to the bottom, and that's a very, very difficult spot to now extricate themselves from.
I wonder how they'll stay in the midst of culture when they've kind of placed themselves in a spot where they're more of a stale low. They don't feel like they're in the center of culture. I think there's a rise in shopping mall frequency, people kind of looking for more of a communal place to walk around. And there was one article we did about Gen Z looking to shopping malls as sort of a nostalgia that they never had,
Mhm.
especially when a lot of them were in high school the last few years during COVID, when there wasn't much for third spaces out of the house. Any hints to the future of the department store? Are they looking to get into the center of culture again? And what are you seeing?
I don't know. That's probably above my pay grade to try to answer a lofty question like that. But what I do think is that it's as much about the reinvention of the mall as it is the reinvention of the department store. Obviously, that has to be a highly partnered venture. But to your whole
Mm-hmm.
point about the mall as town square, as a place to visit and be entertained, and the whole experiential conversation. I when my kids were little, the mall was a fun place to visit. As an adult, I had too much. It was too kind of a too close to me to be fun anymore. But I do think that the mall as as a town square kind of environment does have huge potential. Everything can't be on the magnitude of the Mall of America in Minneapolis. I mean, that's an amazing place, but I think there are smaller versions of that a lot of malls really are going to want to convert themselves into, so that they are a headquarters for that kind of social visit. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to have a 1 day sale to populate the mall. You don't have to have a Prime Day or some, you know, retail discount event to populate the mall. Movie theaters and restaurants, and the whole town square phenomenon. But a department store can't do that by themselves. That has to be very much partnered with the mall owners of America. And I'm sure that process is underway. But, the mall owners probably wish they'd started this 5 to 10 years ago, but they didn't. So here we are.
That's a really good insight. These seem like monolithic department stores, but they really are an anchor in the
Right.
space where they sit, most of them. And so that partnership, they can't do it alone. Even though they seem large enough to make things happen, they really can't do it alone.
Well, I think it just demonstrates how different the thinking has to be from 30 to 40 years ago. But that kind of retail blueprint just lived too long. It didn't start its process of evolution early enough. Macy's building smaller off mall stores would have been a brilliant, bold move 15 years ago. Today, it's like, oh, why did we wait so long? There need to be some brilliant, bold moves so that in another 10 years, we're not still slapping our foreheads going, "On and we wait so long for?"
Yeah. Well, perhaps the charts that you showed would inspire some bold moves. Sometimes in the worst of times, those are when the bold moves happen, when people are willing to take risks.
We shall see.
Jeff, this has been a great conversation. I absolutely enjoyed it. Um, Glad I could
Thanks,
stump you with a few
Chase.
questions, but I learned so much from you every time we chat, and I hope our listeners loved it too. So if anyone has any extra questions, follow-ups, definitely find our comment section and check us out at retailwire.com. That's where the conversation happens every day. And subscribe to our podcast on any of your favorite podcast platforms. And you can even catch our daily newsletter, retailwire.com/subscribe. Thank you, Jeff Sward. It's been a pleasure.